Martha lived in Oak Ridge Community, a clean and peaceful neighborhood where everyone liked to keep their homes beautiful. Every lawn looked green, every fence was freshly painted, and the streets were calm. People in Oak Ridge liked peace and quiet. But there was one person who made things difficult for everyone. Her name was Karen. The president of the Homeowners Association, also called HOA, Karen was known for her strict behavior. She always walked around the neighborhood with a clipboard in her hand, writing down little things she didn't like. If a flower pot was too close to the sidewalk, she would write a warning. If someone's car was parked slightly outside the line, she would send a notice. People tried to stay polite to her, but most of them were tired of her rules. Martha was one of the quiet residents who never caused any trouble. She lived alone in her cozy house, and her grown-up son Ryan worked as a police officer in the nearby town. He often visited her on weekends to have dinner together and help with small house repairs. Martha was proud of him and happy that he had chosen a life of service. Karen, however, always found something to complain about at Martha's home. Once she told Martha that her mailbox was not painted in the approved community color. Another time she said Martha's garden gnome looked out of place and didn't fit the HOA design standards. Martha never argued. She would just smile and promise to fix it later. One Monday morning, Martha noticed Karen standing near her driveway. She was staring at the garage door with a serious face. Martha opened the window and called out kindly, "Good morning, Karen. Everything all right?" Karen turned and smiled stiffly. "Oh yes, just checking the area. We've had some safety concerns lately," she said. Her tone was calm, but her eyes looked sharp as if she was searching for something. After she left, Martha felt uneasy. That same afternoon, her neighbor Linda stopped by for tea. While chatting, Linda mentioned that Karen had been talking to a few people about new safety inspections. She said the HOA might start checking garages and backyards for possible hazards. Martha frowned. "But how can they check people's garages without permission?" she asked. Linda shrugged. "That's what I said too, but Karen claims she has a master key for the neighborhood locks, just in case of emergencies." That statement stayed in Martha's mind for the rest of the day. A master key? That sounded strange. Who gave her that? And why would she need it? When Ryan came over for dinner that evening, Martha told him everything. He listened carefully, his police training making him alert to odd situations. "Mom," he said firmly, "no one can enter your property without your permission, not even someone from the HOA. If anyone tries, you call me right away." Martha nodded. "I don't think she'll actually do it," she said softly. "But she's been acting very strange lately." Over the next few days, Martha noticed Karen more often. She would walk slowly in front of houses, sometimes bending to look at garage doors. One night, around 9, Martha saw Karen standing near her mailbox under the streetlight. She wasn't writing anything down. She was just looking around quietly. When Martha opened the front door, Karen quickly walked away. The next morning, Martha decided to stay calm. Maybe Karen was just being extra cautious. But still, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. She even checked her locks twice before going to bed. 3 days later, Ryan called his mother early in the morning. "Mom, I have to handle a case near your neighborhood today," he said. "It might take a few hours, but I'll drop by to see you afterward." Martha was happy to hear that. She cleaned the kitchen and baked his favorite cookies, excited for his visit. But what she didn't know was that Karen had her own plan that same day. She had told a few people she was going to inspect some garages for security reasons. No one believed she would actually do it, but Karen always took herself very seriously. That afternoon, as the sun began to set and the neighborhood grew quiet, Karen walked toward Martha's house. She had something shiny in her hand, a small bunch of keys. She looked around carefully to make sure no one was watching. Inside the house, Ryan was already there, standing in the garage. He was looking through a few boxes related to a small investigation that had recently come up in the area. He had a legal warrant with him, but no one knew that yet. Outside, Karen took a deep breath and smiled to herself. "Let's see if this key really works," she whispered. Then she slowly reached toward Martha's garage door handle, not knowing what surprise was waiting for her on the other side. Karen stood in front of Martha's garage, pretending to check her clipboard like she always did. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. She looked left and right to make sure no one was outside. The street was quiet. Most neighbors were either inside or out at work. It seemed like the perfect time for her inspection. She believed she had every right to look inside people's garages. As the HOA president, she often said, "I must make sure everyone is following the community standards." But deep inside, she also liked the feeling of control. The small bunch of keys she held in her hand gave her a strange confidence. She called it her master key, even though nobody ever gave her official permission to use it. Karen found a key that she thought would fit Martha's garage door. She bent slightly and placed it in the keyhole. It didn't fit at first. She turned it again, trying a little harder. Then suddenly the door clicked open slightly. Karen's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, it actually works," she whispered proudly to herself. But just as she pushed the door open, a deep voice came from inside the garage. "Can I help you with something?" Karen froze. Her hand stopped on the door handle. She looked up slowly, and there stood Ryan, Martha's son, wearing his police uniform. He had been standing inside the garage, checking some boxes and papers for an investigation. The bright badge on his chest shone in the light coming from the small window. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She had not expected anyone to be inside, especially not a police officer. Ryan looked calm but serious. "You seem surprised to see me," he said, taking a small step forward. Karen tried to smile nervously. "Oh, Officer Ryan, I was just checking the area for safety concerns. You know, HOA responsibilities." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "By opening people's garages without asking them?" he said. His tone wasn't angry, just firm and curious. Karen quickly pulled her hand away from the key. No, I wasn't opening it," she said. "I was just making sure it's locked properly. We've had reports about missing tools and things." Ryan didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her, and the silence made Karen even more nervous. She stepped back a little and adjusted her clipboard, pretending to write something down. Then Martha's voice came from the kitchen door. "Ryan, who are you talking to?" When she saw Karen standing there, her face showed surprise. "Karen, what are you doing at my garage?" Karen turned quickly, trying to smile again. "Oh, hello, Martha. I was just checking for security issues, dear. You know, routine inspection." Martha walked closer, her expression calm but puzzled. "Nobody told me about any inspection." Karen looked uncomfortable. "Well, it's just a new safety program I'm starting. Nothing to worry about." Ryan gently stepped between them, speaking politely but clearly. "Mrs. Karen, as an HOA member, you don't have the right to open private property without consent. Even for safety reasons, you must have written approval or be accompanied by the homeowner." Karen nodded quickly. "Of course, officer. It was a misunderstanding. I'll make sure to inform the board before taking any action next time." Ryan gave a short smile. "That's good to hear." He looked at the small bunch of keys in her hand. "That's quite a collection. Do you often use them for inspections?" Karen laughed nervously. "Oh, these? They're just old keys. I don't even know which one fits where." Martha, still confused, looked at her son. Ryan's calm eyes told her everything was fine. He didn't want to make a scene in front of the neighbors. Karen started to step back slowly. "Well, I should go now. Lots of homes to check, you know." "Busy day," Ryan nodded. "Of course. Have a good day, Mrs. Karen." Karen turned quickly and walked away, her face red and her hands shaking slightly. As soon as she was out of sight, Martha sighed. "Ryan, what was that about? She really tried to open the garage?" Ryan nodded gently. "It looked like it, Mom, but don't worry, I was already here. Maybe this will remind her to stay within her limits." Martha smiled softly. "I just hope she stops bothering everyone. She seems to take her position too seriously." Ryan closed the garage door properly and locked it himself. "I'll talk to the HOA board if she tries something again," he said. Later that evening, Martha and Ryan sat in the living room having tea. Outside, the street looked peaceful again, as if nothing strange had happened. But both of them knew that Karen's curiosity wouldn't stop easily. She was embarrassed, yes, but also too proud to admit her mistake. As night fell, Martha looked out of the window one last time. She saw the empty streetlights and the quiet houses. For the first time, she wondered what Karen would do next, because someone like her never stayed quiet for long. After the incident at Martha's garage, Karen walked home quickly, holding her clipboard tightly to her chest. Her face was still red with embarrassment. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment Ryan had caught her trying to use the key. She had never been so shocked or nervous in her life. As she reached her house, she closed the door quietly and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. How could I let this happen? She whispered to herself. A police officer inside the garage of all places. Karen had always liked being in control. She liked giving notices, planning community events, and reminding people about the HOA rules. It made her feel important. But now she felt small and foolish. What if Ryan reported her? What if the HOA board found out? She sat down at her dining table and started to think of a plan. I'll say it was a misunderstanding, she muttered. Yes, that's it. I was only checking for safety issues. I never tried to open it. But deep inside, she knew Ryan had seen everything. The memory of his calm, serious face made her uneasy. Still, she tried to convince herself that he wouldn't make a big deal out of it. He seemed polite and reasonable. Maybe he would let it go. The next morning, Karen went out for her usual walk. Some neighbors were gardening and others were leaving for work. Normally, she would greet everyone proudly, but today she felt different. People waved at her, but she could tell some of them looked at her strangely. Perhaps Ryan had told someone, or maybe Martha had mentioned it to Linda. Karen's thoughts kept spinning. When she passed by Martha's house, she noticed the curtains move slightly. She imagined Martha standing behind them watching her. Karen quickly turned away and walked faster. Later that afternoon, she received a call from another HOA member, Mr. Turner, who was kind but always curious about gossip. Karen, he said, I heard something strange. Someone said you tried to enter a homeowner's garage yesterday. Is that true? Karen's heart jumped. What? Of course not, she said quickly. People love to twist things. I was just doing a safety check. You know how rumors spread. Mr. Turner sounded unsure. All right, I just wanted to hear your side. People are talking and you might want to clear things up in the next meeting. After the call ended, Karen sat quietly for a few minutes. The word rumors echoed in her mind. It meant people knew. Somehow what happened had spread around. That made her even more determined to protect her image. Meanwhile, at Martha's house, things were calm. Ryan had left early in the morning, promising to call his mother later. Martha was watering her plants when Linda stopped by again. I heard about yesterday, Linda said softly, leaning on the fence. Karen looked upset this morning. Martha smiled a little. Yes, she came by uninvited. But Ryan handled it nicely. I don't think she'll try that again. Linda shook her head. I hope so. She's always been strict, but this time she went too far. Maybe she needs to take a break from all this HOA work. Martha agreed. Sometimes people forget that being in charge doesn't mean controlling everyone. That evening, Karen sat at her desk and wrote down ideas for how to fix her reputation. She planned to host a community safety meeting to show that her actions were meant for good. If people think I was just doing my duty, they'll stop judging me, she said aloud. Feeling a little more confident, the following weekend, she posted flyers around the neighborhood, inviting everyone to the meeting. The paper said, Community Safety Discussion, Let's Keep Oak Ridge Secure and Peaceful. Hosted by Karen, HOA President. When Martha saw the flyer, she sighed softly. She knew Karen was trying to make things right in her own way. She just doesn't like to admit she was wrong, Martha told herself with a smile. On the day of the meeting, many neighbors gathered in the park near the clubhouse. Karen stood in front with her clipboard, looking nervous but trying to smile. She spoke about keeping the area safe, locking doors, and watching out for strangers. Everything seemed to go well until someone asked, Karen, is it true you tried to open Martha's garage without permission? The question made the crowd go silent. Karen froze for a second, then forced a small laugh. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding, she said quickly. I was helping with a security check. Officer Ryan was kind enough to guide me. Martha, who was sitting in the back, noticed the way Karen avoided looking at her. She didn't want to embarrass her, so she stayed quiet. After the meeting ended, people started leaving slowly. Some seemed to believe Karen's explanation, but others looked doubtful. Karen smiled and greeted everyone politely, but she could feel that her image had changed. That night, she sat alone at home, staring at her keys on the table. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she had gone too far. But instead of feeling guilty, she made a new promise to herself, to regain her power in a different way. A few days passed after the community safety meeting. The neighbors went back to their usual routines, but the talk about Karen's garage incident didn't disappear completely. Some believed her story, while others felt something was not right. Still, everyone stayed polite because no one wanted to argue with the HOA president. Karen, however, couldn't stop thinking about it. Even though she had smiled through the meeting, she felt that people were watching her differently now. She noticed how conversations suddenly stopped when she walked by. She saw neighbors whispering near their mailboxes. She knew they were talking about her. At home, Karen sat in her living room staring at her clipboard. For years, it had been her symbol of power in the neighborhood. Now it felt like a reminder of her mistake. "I just wanted everything to stay perfect," she said to herself. "I wanted this community to look beautiful and safe. Why does everyone misunderstand me?" That evening, she decided to do something new. Something that would make people trust her again. She called a few members of the HOA board for a small meeting at her house. She wanted to show them that she was still responsible and in control. When the board members arrived, Karen greeted them warmly. There was Mr. Turner, Mrs. Patel, and Greg, a young man who handled the community's gardening contracts. They all sat around her dining table with tea and biscuits. Karen started with a confident smile. "Thank you for coming on short notice. I've been thinking about new ways to make Oak Ridge safer and better. The residents should feel protected, and we must lead by example." Mr. Turner nodded slowly. "That sounds good, Karen, but people are still talking about that small issue last week. Maybe we should focus on rebuilding trust first." Karen smiled politely. "Exactly. That's why I've invited you here. I have an idea that will remind everyone how much the HOA cares." She opened her folder and pulled out a paper with the title, Neighborhood Watch Program. She explained how they could organize small teams of volunteers to walk around at night, report problems, and make sure every street stayed peaceful. Mrs. Patel liked the idea. "That sounds helpful," she said. "People will see that we are working for them, not against them." Karen smiled, feeling hopeful again. "Yes, and we can start this weekend. We'll go in pairs and note anything unusual. It will show everyone that we are responsible leaders." Greg looked uncertain. "But maybe we should inform Officer Ryan about it," he said. "Since he's a police officer and lives nearby, he might want to be part of this." Karen hesitated. She didn't want Ryan involved. His calm eyes still made her nervous. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "It's just a community watch, not a police operation." The meeting continued for another hour, and by the end, everyone agreed to help. They decided to start their first patrol on Saturday evening. Karen was pleased. She finally felt like she was getting her confidence back. Meanwhile, Martha was spending a peaceful week at home. She enjoyed the calm after all the recent tension. Ryan called her every evening to check in. When she told him about the new community watch plan, Ryan smiled over the phone. "That's not a bad idea," he said, "as long as they're not crossing limits this time." Martha chuckled. "I think Karen has learned her lesson. She's trying to fix her image now." Saturday evening came quickly. The sun went down and the soft streetlights brightened the sidewalks. Karen wore her best coat and met Mr. Turner near the park for their first round. They had small flashlights and notepads. As they walked, Karen looked around proudly. "See? It already feels safer when we take action," she said. Mr. Turner smiled. "Yes, but remember, we're just observing, not inspecting." Karen laughed lightly. "Of course. I've learned that lesson." They passed by Martha Street. The house looked calm, and Karen noticed that the garage light was on again. For a moment, she remembered what had happened that day, and her face turned slightly pale. Mr. Turner noticed her silence. "Everything okay?" Karen nodded quickly. "Yes, just thinking about how beautiful this neighborhood is at night." Their patrol ended peacefully, and they reported nothing unusual. Karen felt proud. For the first time since the incident, she went to bed with a smile. The next morning, she walked outside to check her mailbox. Inside, she found an envelope without a name. She opened it curiously. The paper inside had only one short sentence written in neat handwriting. "Master keys are for emergencies, not curiosity." Karen's heart skipped a beat. She looked around quickly, but no one was there. The street was quiet. She folded the note slowly and went back inside, her mind racing. Who had sent it? Was it Ryan? Or maybe one of the neighbors who saw what happened? She didn't know, but the mysterious note kept replaying in Karen's mind all day. She read it again and again. "Master keys are for emergencies, not curiosity." The sentence was short, but the message felt powerful. She couldn't stop thinking about who might have written it. Karen sat at her dining table, holding the note in her hand while her cup of tea went cold. She looked outside her window and watched the calm street. Everything looked peaceful, but she felt a strange tension in her chest. She knew someone in the neighborhood had seen what happened at Martha's house, but who could it be? Maybe it was Ryan, she whispered to herself. Or maybe Linda. She's always talking to everyone. Karen placed the note in a drawer and locked it. She didn't want anyone else to find it. Still, the words stayed in her head all day. Later that afternoon, she went outside to check the plants in her small garden. A few neighbors were walking their dogs and waving politely. Karen smiled back, pretending everything was normal. She wanted people to see her as calm and confident, not nervous. But inside, her mind was busy. She kept wondering if someone was watching her. Every time she looked around, she felt as if a pair of eyes was following her. It made her uneasy, though she didn't want to admit it. In the evening, Martha sat in her living room reading a book. She looked out of the window and saw Karen standing near her own mailbox, staring at something in her hands. It looked like a letter. Martha watched for a moment, then went back to her book. She hoped Karen was finally realizing that her behavior had consequences. The next morning, Karen decided to visit Martha. She wanted to act friendly, to show everyone that there were no hard feelings. She prepared a small basket with cookies and walked across the street with a polite smile. When Martha opened the door, she looked surprised. "Oh, Karen, what a nice surprise," she said warmly. Karen smiled. "Good morning, Martha. I just wanted to bring you something sweet. It's been a strange few days, hasn't it?" Martha accepted the basket and invited her inside. "Would you like some tea?" she asked kindly. Karen nodded. As they sat together, Karen tried to sound casual. "I just wanted to clear the air about that small misunderstanding last week. I truly didn't mean to upset anyone." Martha smiled politely. "I understand, Karen. I know you care about this community. But sometimes caring too much can cause problems too." Karen nodded slowly. "Yes, I see that now," she said softly. Ryan's name came up next. Martha mentioned how he had told her to stay calm and not worry too much about HOA issues. Karen smiled nervously. "Your son is very professional," she said. "He handled the situation well," Martha agreed. "He tries to be fair to everyone." The conversation went smoothly, and for the first time, Karen felt a little better. When she left, Martha waved goodbye kindly. "Take care, Karen," she said. "And don't stress yourself too much. The neighborhood will be fine." Karen walked back home feeling lighter. Maybe things were getting better. Maybe people would start trusting her again. But when she reached her doorstep, she noticed something unusual. Another envelope was lying under her mat. It looked almost the same as the first one. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. She looked around. The street was quiet again. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was another note written in the same neat handwriting. "Some doors are better left closed." Karen's heart skipped. She quickly looked around again, but no one was there. The soft wind moved the leaves on the trees, and a dog barked in the distance. Everything seemed normal, except for that strange message. She went inside quickly and locked the door behind her. She placed the new note beside the first one and stared at them both. "Who is doing this?" she whispered. The handwriting was smooth, calm, and tidy. It didn't look angry. It looked careful, as if the person wanted to warn her, not scare her. But that made it even more confusing. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every small sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the fridge, made her heart race. She checked the locks twice and looked through the window blinds again and again. The next day, she decided to tell someone. She went to meet Mr. Turner at the community office. "Someone is leaving strange notes at my door," she said quietly. Mr. Turner looked surprised. "Notes, what do they say?" Karen hesitated. "Just reminders about the master key and the garage thing." Mr. Turner gave a small smile. "Well, maybe it's their way of saying you should be more careful next time." Karen didn't like that answer. "So you think it's one of the neighbors?" He shrugged. "It's possible. People remember what happened. Maybe someone wants you to think twice before doing something like that again." Karen sighed and nodded. "You're probably right." As she walked home, she felt a strange mix of emotions: embarrassment, fear, and curiosity. She didn't know who was behind the notes. But one thing was certain. Someone was watching her actions closely. That evening, she looked at the notes once more before placing them in a box and locking it tightly. She didn't want to see them again, but she also couldn't throw them away. For the first time, Karen realized that control came with consequences. She wanted to make things right. but she didn't yet know how. Outside, the streetlights glowed softly, and the peaceful night of Oak Ridge continued, unaware that its most controlling neighbor was finally beginning to feel what it meant to be watched. Days passed, but Karen couldn't stop thinking about the two mysterious notes. Each time she looked at them, she felt uneasy. Someone was clearly watching her, but she didn't know who it was or what they wanted. The messages were not mean or rude, but they made her feel exposed, like every move she made was being quietly noticed. Karen began to change her routine. She no longer walked around the neighborhood with her clipboard every morning. She stayed inside most of the time, peeking out the window once in a while to make sure everything was normal. Her neighbors noticed the change. Linda whispered to Martha one morning, "Have you seen Karen lately? She doesn't walk around anymore." Martha smiled softly. "Maybe she's just taking a break. It's good for her to rest," Linda nodded. "Yes, but it's strange. She used to check every house like clockwork. Now it's like she's avoiding people." Martha looked thoughtful. "Sometimes silence teaches more than words," she said kindly. Meanwhile, Karen tried to stay calm, but her mind stayed busy. She started to check her front yard carefully every morning, looking for new letters. But for a few days, none appeared. Slowly, she began to feel a bit more relaxed. "Maybe it's over," she whispered to herself. "Maybe whoever it was has stopped." She even decided to step outside and visit the park again. The air felt fresh and the flowers were blooming beautifully. As she walked down the path, she saw some children playing and their parents chatting nearby. A few neighbors smiled politely at her and she smiled back. But when she looked toward Martha's house, she noticed something strange. Ryan's car was parked outside. He was standing by the mailbox talking to his mother. They both looked happy and peaceful. For a moment, Karen thought about walking over to say hello, but then she remembered the embarrassment from before. She turned around quietly and walked the other way. Later that afternoon, while Karen was watering her plants, she saw the mail carrier stop by. She waited until the van drove away, then went to check her mailbox. There was a small envelope again. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out. It was plain white, just like before. She opened it carefully, and inside was a new message written in the same neat handwriting. "Truth is best faced with honesty, not excuses." Karen stood still, staring at the words. Her throat felt dry. She didn't understand why someone was sending these notes, but the message was clear. The person wanted her to admit what she had done wrong. She sat on her porch, thinking deeply. Maybe she had hurt people more than she realized. Maybe her actions, though small, had made others feel uncomfortable and unsafe. That evening, she called an HOA board meeting again. When Mr. Turner and Mrs. Patel arrived, she looked calmer than before. "I want to discuss something important," she said gently. They sat at her table, curious. Karen took a deep breath. "I think I've made mistakes. I wanted to keep the community perfect, but I may have gone too far. I've received notes that made me realize people were uncomfortable with how I handled things." Mr. Turner looked surprised but pleased. "Karen, that's very thoughtful of you to say. Everyone knows you work hard, but yes, maybe it's time to take a softer approach." Mrs. Patel nodded. "Admitting mistakes doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise." Karen smiled slightly. "I think you're right. I'll make some changes." They spent the next hour discussing new plans, simpler rules, more friendly meetings, and fun community events that would bring neighbors together. For the first time in a long while, Karen felt a sense of relief instead of control. After the meeting, she walked outside and stood under the soft evening light. The air felt peaceful and the street looked quiet. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Maybe this is the change I needed." Just then, she saw someone walking slowly down the street. It was Ryan. He noticed her and gave a polite nod. "Good evening, Mrs. Karen," he said kindly. Karen smiled back. "Good evening, Officer Ryan. Beautiful night, isn't it?" Ryan nodded. "It is. I'm glad to see things are calm again." Karen hesitated, then said softly, "I wanted to thank you. You made me think about my actions. Sometimes we don't realize how our choices affect others." Ryan smiled. "We all err." The next few days in Oak Ridge felt different. The air seemed lighter and the people smiled more often. Even the children who used to run away from Karen's watchful eyes now waved at her when they saw her passing by. Karen could feel that change was finally happening inside her and around her. She no longer felt the need to carry her clipboard or check who followed the HOA rules. Instead, she found herself enjoying small things she had never noticed before. The sound of laughter from the park, the sweet smell of flowers near her porch, and the friendly good mornings from neighbors she once avoided. One morning, as Karen walked toward the park, she saw Martha sitting on a bench with a cup of tea in her hand. Martha looked up, smiled, and waved. Karen hesitated for a moment, but then smiled back and walked toward her. "Good morning, Martha," she said softly. "Good morning, Karen," Martha replied kindly. "It's been a while since we talked." Karen nodded, a little shy. "Yes, it has. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I realize I wasn't very kind before. I thought I was helping, but I only made people uncomfortable." Martha's gentle eyes warmed. "It takes courage to say that." "Thank you, Karen. Everyone deserves a chance to change." They both sat quietly for a while, watching the children play. For the first time in years, Karen felt peaceful sitting beside Martha, without feeling the need to control or correct anything. After a few minutes, Martha said softly, "You know, this neighborhood used to be full of laughter when we first moved here. People helped each other, shared food, and had small parties in their gardens. Maybe we can bring that back again." Karen smiled slowly. "That sounds lovely. I think I'd like to help with that." That same afternoon, Martha and Karen visited a few neighbors to discuss the idea of a small neighborhood gathering. Something simple, just to bring everyone together again. At first, people were surprised to see Karen at their doors, smiling politely without her clipboard. She said the same thing to everyone. "We're planning a small evening get-together this weekend. No rules, no forms, just food, laughter, and good company." One by one, the neighbors agreed. Some offered to bring snacks, others promised to bring music, and the children were excited to help with decorations. Ryan even stopped by later that evening when he heard about the plan. "Mom told me you're organizing something special," he said with a friendly smile. Karen laughed softly. "Not organizing, just helping. I think I've done enough organizing for a lifetime." Ryan chuckled. "It's nice to see you relaxed. Oak Ridge will look different with everyone together again." When Saturday evening arrived, the community park looked cheerful. Strings of lights hung between the trees. Tables were covered with colorful tablecloths, and delicious food filled the air with warm smells. People gathered, chatting and laughing like old friends. Karen stood at the edge for a moment, watching everything. She could hardly believe this was the same neighborhood where silence used to fill the evenings. Martha noticed her standing alone and waved her over. "Come, Karen, you helped make this happen." Karen joined her and looked around. "I didn't do much," she said quietly. "I only stopped doing what was wrong." Martha smiled. "Sometimes stopping the wrong thing is the start of something right." Everyone was happy that night. The children ran around with sparkly lights in their hands. The adults shared stories and music played softly in the background. Even Mr. Turner, who was known for being strict, was laughing and dancing a little. Karen sat beside Martha and sighed with a content smile. "I used to think order meant peace," she said. "But I was wrong. Peace comes from people caring for each other." Martha nodded. "You've learned something very important, Karen. You've changed, and that change has changed the neighborhood too." Just then, Ryan walked over holding 2 cups of juice. "For you both," he said cheerfully. "You've earned a break." Karen laughed and took a sip. "Thank you, Ryan. And thank you for making me realize how my actions affected others. Without that lesson, I might never have seen this day." Ryan smiled kindly. "You saw it because you wanted to. That's what matters." As the night grew deeper, lights twinkled across the park and laughter echoed under the stars. For the first time, everyone felt truly connected, not through rules but through kindness and respect. Karen looked around one last time before heading home. The neighborhood that once felt tense and divided now felt warm and full of life. She whispered softly, "Maybe this is what home is meant to be, a place of peace, not power." And for the first time in a long while, her heart felt light. The morning after the community gathering, Oak Ridge felt different. The streets were quieter than usual, but there was a gentle warmth in the air. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now greeted each other with smiles. Even Karen noticed it as she stepped outside for her morning walk. For the first time in weeks, she left her house without a clipboard or a notebook. She wanted to enjoy the peaceful morning without worrying about rules or inspections. As she walked, she waved at Martha, who was watering her garden. "Good morning, Karen." Martha called cheerfully. "Good morning, Martha," Karen replied with a genuine smile. "How are you today?" "Very well," Martha said. "And the neighborhood feels brighter after yesterday." Karen nodded. "Yes, it does. I never realized how much a simple gathering could change things." As Karen continued down the street, she noticed Ryan checking on some streetlights nearby. He smiled when he saw her. "Good morning, Mrs. Karen," he said. "Good morning, Ryan," Karen replied. "Thank you again for your advice. It really helped me see things differently." Ryan nodded politely. "Glad to hear that. Oak Ridge is better when everyone works together." Karen continued her walk, taking in the fresh morning air. She saw neighbors cleaning their yards, children playing near their homes, and a few families chatting on porches. It was a peaceful sight, and it gave her a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt before. Back at her house, Karen decided to take a new approach with the HOA. She called a meeting for all the board members and volunteers who had helped with the neighborhood watch. When everyone arrived, Karen greeted them warmly. "Thank you for coming," she said, smiling at the familiar faces. "I wanted to talk about our next steps. We've learned that control is not the same as leadership. From now on, we will focus on helping each other, not just enforcing rules." Mr. Turner nodded. "That's wise, Karen. People respond better to guidance than strict rules." Mrs. Patel added, "And the community feels happier when we work together. Your change of approach will help everyone feel safe and respected." Karen smiled at them all. "I've also realized that listening is just as important as giving advice. From now on, I'll make sure everyone has a voice, and I'll be open to feedback." The board members agreed enthusiastically, and plans were made for small activities, gardening days, evening walks, and mini potlucks to encourage everyone to spend time together. Karen felt proud, not because she was in charge, but because she was helping people connect. Later that day, Martha stopped by Karen's house with a basket of fresh bread. "I wanted to share this with you," she said kindly. "Thank you for making an effort to change things. It really means a lot." Karen accepted the basket with a smile. "Thank you, Martha. Your patience and understanding helped me more than I can say." In the afternoon, Karen visited the park where the last community gathering had been held. She saw neighbors playing games, children laughing, and music in the background. It reminded her how different the neighborhood felt compared to just a few weeks ago. She found a quiet bench and sat down, watching the families enjoy themselves. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to correct anyone or monitor every move. She simply watched and felt content. That evening, as the sun began to set, Karen walked back home slowly. The sky was painted with soft orange and pink colors, reflecting the peaceful feeling she had inside. Her heart felt lighter, her mind calmer. When she reached her doorstep, she looked at her mailbox. There were no mysterious notes this time. Instead, she found a small card with a simple message. "Thank you for learning and caring. Oak Ridge is brighter because of you." Karen held the card in her hands and smiled. She didn't know who had sent it, but she didn't need to. The message matched how she now felt inside. Grateful, peaceful, and ready to continue being a better neighbor. That night, Karen sat by her window, looking out over the quiet street. The soft glow of the streetlights reflected off the sidewalks. She thought about everything that had happened, her mistakes, the lessons she learned, and the connections she had made. Oak Ridge was no longer just a neighborhood full of rules. It was a place of understanding, kindness, and harmony. Karen finally understood that control could never replace trust and respect. And as she turned off the lights and went to bed, she felt truly happy for the first time in a long while. Peace had returned to Oak Ridge, and to Karen's heart as well. The community would continue to grow together, stronger and kinder than before, with every neighbor feeling safer and more connected. And Karen, once known only for rules and notices, had become a symbol of change, understanding, and a gentle guiding hand in Oak Ridge.